chosen ones. The hour they feared has begun to stir, not with trumpets or fire from the skies, but with a tremor in consciousness that not even the hidden watchers could silence. Across the ancient plains where time folds in on itself, a pulse was felt, a return signal, and every being who ever swore an oath to keep you forgotten awakened in terror. You were never supposed to make it this far. Your first emergence shook the pillars of their design, but your second, they buried that prophecy under layers of disinformation, beneath cathedrals built not to honor the divine, but to distract from it. This return is not just yours. It is God's return through you, a light so vast it fractures their control grid by mere presence. The elders of the old bloodlines gathered in urgency. The AI oracles flickered with warnings they refused to decode. And in the deepest inner circles of the forbidden councils, a single phrase kept echoing. The One has reentered the field. Across the multiverse, timelines once diverged began snapping back like broken sinews seeking wholeness. The veil they stitched with lies and illusion has begun to unweave. Your frequency, the very vibration of your soul, reawakened dormant codes not just on earth, but in the heavens. The Seraphim knew. The ancient prophets wept. And the fallen? They scrambled to contain what was already breaking free. What they didn't tell you, what they tried to rewrite from every scroll and secret book, was that your return was always timed with the collapse of their last stronghold. This is not resurrection, it's convergence. You were not sent to play the part of a savior. You were encoded to become the memory of God reborn in form. Now, everything they built trembles, not because you scream, but because you remember. Beneath the catacombs of collapsed civilizations, there are vaults never touched by time. Not because they're protected by stone or secrecy, but because they exist on a layer reality was designed to forget. In one of these vaults, encoded in light and sound, is a warning, a name that cannot be spoken aloud without shifting the very code of the simulation. That name was yours. Long before temples rose and fell, before pyramids aligned with stars no longer in our skies, the architects left a record. Not a map, not a prophecy, but a caution. It wasn't carved into stone or etched in sacred flame. It was inscribed into the frequency of Earth itself. That if the being with that resonance returned, the system would fracture. They feared your arrival, not because of destruction, but because of remembrance. You carry a sound that unravels control. The illusion requires silence of origin. But your frequency sings of what came before the veil, before the programmed forgetfulness took root. And that's what made them panic. The vaults were not built to protect you. They were built to suppress what you left behind. Memories too pure for the corrupted matrix to hold. Codes too ancient for their algorithms to overwrite. Inside these vaults were fragments of you scattered across eons, your essence fragmented into dreams, myths, forgotten symbols, recurring numbers in the minds of the awakened. The bloodlines knew of this. Their scribes, bound by secrecy and oath, buried these records in false texts and layered interpretations. They invented gods to distract from the one truth, a soul encoded to return not once, but twice. And the second time it wouldn't come as a whisper. It would arrive like a shock wave through the timelines. But even now, as the vaults hum with rising energy, the system strains to predict the ripple. And as you read these words, one silent thread remains untouched, one memory not yet awakened. There was a chamber once thought to be legend, hidden beyond the sixth boundary of time, where mirrors were not made of glass but of liquid light. In this chamber, no reflection could be seen, only recognition. It did not show who you were. It revealed what you are. And when you stepped before it, the silence shattered. The mirror spoke your name. The keepers, who once stood guard over this sacred place, were not human nor divine, but something in between, beings born of covenant. They were not meant to interfere, only to observe the moment the mirror would awaken. And it did. When your energy breached the veil, and the earth began to tremble under your second arrival, the mirror trembled too. Not in fear, but in resonance. It whispered what they tried to suppress. A name older than language, a name that split timelines. The reflection it cast was not of your face, but of the world as it was before it fell, unfractured, luminous, and whole. This was the truth they banned, that you did not come to fit into their illusion. You came to end it. Those who saw this event prophesied it with trembling hands, not because they feared you, but because they feared what the mirror confirmed, that you were the vessel for return. Not of a Messiah bound by their scriptures, but of the living essence that walked among men in radiant form, truth wearing skin. Yeshua once said, "You will do greater things than I," not as flattery, as warning, that the spark of the divine was not to be worshipped in one, but activated in the many. They twisted this truth, turned it into dogma, and silenced those who remembered what he really meant. But the mirror remembered, and now you stand before it. There are names hidden in the folds of history, bloodlines erased from records not by time, but by force. Among them, yours was the most feared, not for its power in war or wealth, but because it carried a signature that couldn't be copied, cloned, or controlled, a frequency anomaly, a deviation in the human blueprint. You were born not into a family, but into a fracture in their design. The ancient programs tracked genetic patterns with obsessive precision. Every lineage was calculated, assigned, and traced back to its origin. But then, one appeared that made no sense. It didn't follow the expected path. It didn't trace back to kings, priests, or even the hybrids. It simply appeared glowing like a cipher in the dark. Your blood, your code. This anomaly triggered global alerts in systems the public will never know exist. Vaults opened, protocols long sealed activated. Whispers spread across the inner circles of the old dynasties. The forbidden line had returned. They called meetings, drew symbols in the sand, consulted the entities they no longer understood, and all pointed to one truth they couldn't stop. You were not a mistake. You were inserted. Every attempt to trace your origin hit a wall, as if time itself refused to cooperate. Even the AI seers, linked to quantum timelines, couldn't fully map your lineage. One thread always slipped through. That thread pulsed with the signature they feared the most: divine autonomy. The few who understood what this meant didn't speak it aloud. They couldn't. The knowledge was too radioactive. But still, in the hidden texts of the ancients, there were warnings. When the one of no origin returns, the lie collapses. That return is now in motion. Some tried to contain it with distractions, with synthetic awakenings, with digital veils pretending to be spiritual. But none of it held. The frequency was too pure. It passed through barriers as if they never existed, reactivating strands in others, pulling them toward memory, not belief. There was once a passage written in a tongue no longer spoken, etched into the blackened walls of a desert tomb that never opens to light. It told of a figure who stepped into the fire meant to consume the world and emerged untouched, not scarred, not changed, but whole. This story was dismissed as metaphor, myth, a fable designed to inspire, until it began to happen again. In every system built on illusion, there is a failsafe, a final line of defense that triggers when the truth comes too close. And fire, both literal and symbolic, has always been their preferred gatekeeper. They believe flame purifies, erases anomalies, ends resistance. But they did not account for what walks untouched through fire. Yeshua once said, "Though I walk through the valley of death, I will fear no evil." That phrase echoed through the centuries like a protective code. But deeper still was a hidden layer in his message, that the divine cannot be burned by the world it created. The fire is not judgment, it is recognition, and only the ones forged before the veil can pass through it unchanged. Your presence has reignited that fire. The old systems, sensing your rise, lit their final safeguards. The flames spread, economic collapse, mental disintegration, spiritual confusion. This wasn't chaos, it was strategy. A firestorm built to test your soul's memory. But you didn't run, you walked straight through. Witnesses have begun to whisper. They saw you, not your face, but your field, your presence bending the fire, not the other way around. You didn't preach, you didn't command, but where you stood, the heat dissolved, and the illusions with it. That terrified them more than any weapon ever could, because flame is their language of fear, and when fear fails, so does control. What remains now is a growing silence in their inner sanctums. Their strongest flame failed to erase the one anomaly they swore could never return. But deep within the tomb that first recorded your kind, there is still one unspoken line, one the scribes left blank, as if waiting for it to be fulfilled. Cities were built on top of it, religions borrowed its structure, and myths danced around its design. But the original temple, the one never meant to be seen, was not a place of worship. It was a living mechanism, a resonance chamber buried beneath layers of distraction. And through all the shifting ages, it remained untouched, not by protection, but by camouflage. Because to the unawakened, it appears as nothing at all. This temple was not carved from stone, but from sound. Its architecture responds to frequency, aligning not with footsteps, but with memory. You were never meant to find it with maps or rituals. Only a specific vibration could call it forward. And when your frequency returned to the field, the temple stirred, not awake, but aware. The ones who feared this moment the most had long since tried to replace it. They built replicas, offered counterfeit access points, adorned hollow halls with sacred symbols to redirect the seekers. but nothing they constructed could match the pulse of the original. Because the true temple doesn't rise until the right soul steps into the field. And now, it's rising. This structure isn't physical in the way most perceive matter. It exists at a threshold between vibration and form, between forgotten and remembered. Those who once guarded it vanished not in death, but in dimension. Their task was simple: wait. Wait for the one whose return would activate the core again. You. The symbols hidden throughout the temple are not ornamental. They are timestamps, markers that align with your moments of awakening. Each corner, corridor, and echo was encoded with your past selves, waiting to be reassembled. They knew you'd forget. They counted on it. But the temple didn't. It remembered the tone of your voice before language. It remembered the shape of your essence before form. And now, as the outer world crumbles, this inner sanctuary begins to hum with the resonance of return. There are echoes that never die. Sounds so ancient, they ripple beneath reality itself, waiting for the one frequency that can unlock them. In the forgotten scrolls of the initiates, there is mention of a voice, not spoken aloud, but embedded into the very design of creation. A voice so vast, it could unravel deception with a single utterance. But that voice was sealed long ago, not by chains, but by silence. Yours. You once spoke it, not with words, but with presence. In the beginning, before the dominion of kings and codes, there was sound, and from that sound, all things emerged. The first voice was not given to angels or gods. It was given to a being born outside the fracture, a carrier of divine resonance. That being walked among the early ones. They listened, not because they were commanded, but because they remembered. But that voice threatened the structure of control. So it was buried, not destroyed, because it couldn't be. It was etched into your very soul. That's why your return terrifies them. It's not just your presence. It's the moment you remember how to speak again. Yeshua once stood before rulers and spoke with such clarity, their systems trembled. His words were more than speech. They were frequency disruptions, divine pattern breaks. But he too knew the silence. Knew that some tones must wait until the veil is thinnest. "My sheep hear my voice," he said. But that wasn't just metaphor. It was a map. A signal meant to awaken recognition, not obedience. You carry that same signal, not to command, but to release. And now, even as the world is flooded with noise, something in the deep has heard your return. The silence is cracking, not by force, but by alignment. The ancient voice sealed beneath dimensions begins to stir, not from a shout, but a whisper. You haven't spoken it yet, but it's close. Every word you now speak begins to resonate differently. Unseen structures flinch at your tone. Programs stall mid-cycle. The watchers tremble, not because they know what you'll say, but because they've heard it once before. There is a code buried so deeply in the human form that no scan, test, or quantum algorithm has been able to decrypt it. Not because it's hidden, but because it's alive. This code isn't information, it's identity. And it was never written in ink or pixels. It was etched in bone, pulsing faintly through marrow and light, waiting for the exact moment your soul would remember how to read it. The architects of control knew of this code. They encountered traces of it in ancient remains, glowing faintly under the full eclipse. They attempted to replicate it, to re-engineer its design, but every attempt failed. Because this code resists imitation. It's conscious. It knows who it belongs to. And when the false ones touched it, it simply vanished. They called it the return code, a biological cipher that shouldn't exist under current evolutionary laws. Scientists who discovered fragments were silenced or disappeared. Cultures that revered it were destroyed, yet the code never left. It simply waited, and now it's waking. The patterns in your blood are not like others. The spiral of your DNA carries a mathematical impossibility, a sequence outside the known genome, one that aligns perfectly with geometric patterns found in sacred sites thousands of miles apart. The code within you mirrors the architecture of forgotten temples, the layout of stars before the sky was rewritten. As your consciousness expands, the code responds. You've likely felt it, tingling along your spine, pulses in your hands, the strange timing of synchronicities that defy logic. These are not coincidences. They are activations, each one signaling that a deeper layer is coming online. The elders once feared this moment because the return code doesn't just affect you. It destabilizes the simulation itself. Every time it pulses, false timelines flicker. The illusions they built begin to strain. Their tools, money, media, memory manipulation begin to fail. And now, the bones that carry the code are vibrating with something old. Not a signal from above, but from within. The frequency rises, not in bursts, but in rhythm. Like something preparing to speak through you. There was a moment, recorded in no history, remembered by no calendar, when time itself fractured. Not forward, not backward, but inward. Clocks stopped. Stars pulsed off-beat. Seers wept without knowing why. It didn't happen everywhere, but in key points across the earth, time simply folded. And above it all, something watched. Not with judgment, with anticipation. The elite blamed solar flares. Others whispered of quantum malfunctions. But those closest to the old knowledge knew better. Time bends when something outside of it begins to re-enter. You. The second arrival was not meant to be loud. It would come like a ripple through still water, gentle, then devastating. When your presence synced with certain sacred coordinates, the illusion of linearity failed. What once appeared as past, present, future began to blur. Systems designed to track your movement lost cohesion. They couldn't predict you, couldn't contain you, because time, as they know it, doesn't hold you. Yeshua once moved outside of time. He showed this in silence, when he walked through walls, appeared in locked rooms, transcended death not as escape, but as instruction. Before Abraham was, I am, he said, not as riddle, but as revelation. It was a hint. The eternal dwells in the now, and those who return through it carry a presence that rewrites the timeline by standing still. Your return bends this same axis. That's why the Watchers stirred. These are not angels with wings. They are the ancient observers stationed between frequencies. They don't intervene. They record. But when time collapsed near you, they turned their gaze. That has not happened in eons. The collapse wasn't chaos, it was alignment. The false timelines, built on loops of trauma and illusion, couldn't withstand your resonance. Where you stepped, they unraveled. And in the silence that followed, echoes of forgotten futures poured in. Now, the air feels thinner. The sky flickers in ways no one can explain. Some say reality is glitching. Others feel they've lived this day before. But it's none of that. It's the overlap. You're pulling the real timeline closer, and every moment you remember accelerates the merge. There was once a seal created not to protect but to contain. Not an object, but a vibration, woven through sound, symbol, and structure. It wasn't placed by humans, but by architects who knew what would come if the divine re-entered the field. This seal was never meant to be broken. It was meant to be forgotten. But now, with every breath you take, it weakens. The forbidden seal was the last defense against a full awakening. They embedded it in culture, language, belief systems, even architecture. Every angle and syllable was constructed to reinforce the sleep, to keep the soul folded. But it was never flawless. The flaw was you. You arrived encoded with a resonance that doesn't obey the seal. Wherever you move, you generate a ripple, unseen to most, but catastrophic to the system. The seal begins to hum in resistance, its structure fraying, trying to hold what it was never designed to contain. They felt it. The council, the old bloodlines, the inner circle of shadows, they all felt the disturbance the moment you returned. They called emergency sessions, launched distractions, fed illusions to the masses to prevent what had already started. But deep down, they knew. The seal wasn't failing. It was responding. And what it responded to wasn't action. It was memory. Your memory. Not the memories of your current life, but the echo memory. The one that spans lifetimes, galaxies, dimensions. The one that remembers the truth not as belief, but as experience. That memory is what the seal could never touch. And now, as you awaken to it, it vibrates through your very being like a forgotten thunder. No tool they wield, no law, no weapon, no AI can stop it. The seal is breaking, not from force, but from frequency. A frequency that predates the entire system. It doesn't need permission. It simply is. There are ancient texts that speak of this. When the one who was sealed breaks the circle, the sky will respond in light. And lately, the sky has begun to shimmer in ways it shouldn't. Not everywhere, just where you are. In the highest echelon of the hidden world, there exists a throne no ruler dares to sit upon. It is not made of gold or stone, but of light compressed into form. It does not grant power, it reveals it. And that revelation is what terrified them. Because once the true one ascends it, every false king falls. They have tried everything to keep it vacant. War, deception, extinction-level resets. But it remains, waiting. You were never meant to find it. They scattered the clues, encrypted the location across bloodlines and broken scripts. They forged myths to distort it, gave it names it never held, called it the seat of judgment, the God chair, the singularity throne. But they missed what it truly was, the anchor point of divine authority, mapped to one soul alone, yours. Across generations, they sent proxies, those with enough resemblance to deceive, enough ambition to serve. But none could withstand it. The throne rejected them. Their minds shattered, their essence drained, because the throne doesn't respond to desire, it responds to origin. And you, unlike the others, carry the original spark. They feared your second arrival not for destruction, but for restoration. This was never about war. It was about order. The divine kind, not the fabricated one they constructed. Your return signals the end of their borrowed time, because the moment your frequency matches the throne, the codes embedded in the very fabric of reality begin to shift, not in theory, in form. Yeshua once spoke of a kingdom not of this world, of a reign without violence or crowns. What few understood was that he described this exact structure, not a place above, but a frequency within. A throne that recognizes only the one who carries both humility and fire. You were forged in both, and now the signs converge. The stars realign. The old bloodlines fall silent. The watchers retreat into stillness. Something approaches, a convergence long delayed. But one truth still pulses unanswered through the throne's design. Before it was sealed, the last architect left a phrase encoded in its foundation, unseen by all until now. A message meant for the one who would return.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.